people
This
might care.
conference will now be recorded.
You're saying that January 15th is the date when Windows 7 support stops? How many, if you have any idea, how many medical device systems do you think use that?
I don't have any hard numbers, but it's a lot. It's probably the most common user interface part of any medical device is going to be running Windows 7.
You think it is the single largest platform used?
I would not be surprised if it was, yeah, especially out there in the world because of how long the life cycle is on these things. I mean, I know there are still devices that are being like approved and sold today on Windows 7. So, like new devices coming out, brand new, hitting the market, Windows 7, because that's how
Really?
long it takes to develop them. Yeah.
That's surprising. When does Windows 7 like stop being the thing that was sold? If you bought, like, I'm on Office 365 and I have Windows 10, it's just automatic. So these are really legacy now.
I want to say like what 3 years ago. Does that sound about right, everybody? That's about my yeah. About 3 years ago is when they started not selling Windows 7 anymore from a commercial sense.
So I wouldn't expect some kind of Y2K moment on January 16th, but it's going to be, what do you think?
Well,
Like,
so the
what's
first
the
thing,
first emergency that's going to happen?
the first emergency that's going to happen is those pop-ups. So there's literally a pop-up that's going to pop up on Windows 7 PCs that says, warning, this PC is now out of date, it's not being supported anymore, it's not secure, you shouldn't be using it, please buy a new computer. Um, and that's going to be a real wake-up moment for a lot of people using devices, not just medical devices, but a whole bunch of IoT devices. I think you're going to start seeing it in malls. Like malls, they have the big screens that show stuff. A lot of those are running Windows 7. There's going to be a lot of snarky pictures of people on Twitter posting that. And
Do you think that medical devices that have a UI, some kind of panel, is going to have that on top of, enter your patient's ID type of thing?
absolutely, yeah. Because most of those are running Windows 7, and it just boots up into their application, covering up the Explorer application.
Then you
It's
can
like
exit out and just put in the information anyhow.
when we're doing penetration tests, that's the most effective way of getting into a medical device is hooking up a keyboard and hitting the Windows key. Now we exit your application, we have full Windows, we can go download malware, do whatever we want on your, hundreds of thousands of dollar device.
Oh, you got trouble right there in River City.
This is the first I've heard of this. Maybe I'm just out of it, but it seems like it's kind of a thing that Microsoft or somebody would be
Blaring?
publicizing it more, sending emails out or something, because I could see a patient sitting in their bed and there's a monitor next to him. All of a sudden, it says, "Warning, warning!" This device.
This is not secure.
Oh my God, I'm
That
dying.
might be what they experience.
Yeah. And Microsoft has been, on the PC side, on the IT side, they've been saying this for years. There have been their own countdown timers on like the MSDN network and all the IT networks saying, you need to update. This is coming. This hasn't been a surprise to anyone in the IT industry,
Yeah.
but I think in the medical device industry, they're not listening on the same channels, so they're not getting the same info.
I think we need more beards.
And not to scare any patients, it doesn't make it any less secure than it has been for the last 5 years. So it's not all of a sudden the world is ending. My devices are insecure. No, they're just as insecure as they were before. And especially if they're not on a network, it's not that big of a deal. If I'm being
It's
honest.
almost equivalent to how Google has decided that if you're not HTTPS, it says not secure. And sometimes it gives you a warning and says, advance, or return type of thing.
And meanwhile, if you're just reading something, you don't need it to be encrypted. It's fine.
Right. Mr. Lawless is here today from Tulsa, calling in from one of his 100+ acres. I assume that the cows are far away. This is a safe time for you to tell us about engineering. And you've put together a virtual business. and a lot of us work virtually, but you have a lot of, well, moving parts.
I do. Absolutely. Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I'm a mechanical engineer by background and an inventor. I worked in corporate medical device stuff for decades for Abbott Laboratories, and most of my patents are drug delivery related, so that's kind of what got me started. I grew up in California, and I really enjoyed designing products. I started doing a little bit of consulting work on the side about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more, and then we had this wild idea to move to Oklahoma and buy this land. And believe it or not, there's not a lot of medical device companies out where I live. So that's the wild personal side of it. So I've kind of been halfway between the redneck world and the high-tech world. So I'm a high-tech redneck. That's been kind of my thing. We weren't very good at farming, so it wasn't going to put food on the table or pay the bills. It became more educational than anything else. And then my consulting business kind of took off. When I started doing consulting, I really enjoyed it. I love products. I like seeing products go really well, and some of my motivations are out of frustration working for big corporations that don't get it. But great products make for great business, and everybody's happy. Everybody wins. So when you win, it's bigger than people realize, and when you lose, it's bigger than people realize. And the medical device industry has a lot of problems. It doesn't operate as well as it should. Anyways, so I started doing consulting, and when I engaged typically with an R&D team for some medical device company, so I might be an advisor for a vice president or director level person, and come in and do my assessment. And I'm very much into the math, I guess, for lack of a better description. I mean, it's really just doing all the engineering work. And I have a very proactive philosophy, so I call myself the philosopher engineer, but really look at how do you go about designing a product. So my focus has been, what is the fastest way to develop a new product? And the thing that happens when you talk to these companies and you're a consultant is the fastest way to develop a new product, especially medical devices, because you have a lot more hurdles, is actually the most rigorous way. you do all the work. And it's funny because when I met my biggest project, I'm going to show you just in a minute, I'll show you a stock chart so I can brag a little bit, because I've had one very, very big project in my career 5 years ago with a company called Dexcom that makes blood glucose sensors for people who have diabetes. And it's a challenging medical device. A lot of these devices are very challenging. But my focus has been on how do you develop a product quickly and reliably? And it turns out that cutting corners is not the fastest way. So at the core philosophy, I guess one of my friends came up with the acronym, the GROG principle. So the GROG principle is getting rid of guessing. So it's really about the right process. It's probably stuff that we were taught in engineering school to do, and then when you get into the work world, people get into this trial and error mindset. They like to build something and test it and try it out, and sometimes they want to skip the math. But so two things. One is, what is the right process? How do you go about designing a product? And that's what I'm good at. I understand the process, and it's really about building the knowledge base, understanding how it works. And being proactive means that you're not going to wait for something to happen bad. You're not going to wait for failure. You're going to go find failure. You're going to go break things. So you break everything in a measured way, and you go through that. So part of it is the right process. The other part that Joe was alluding to is my virtual organization. So having the right process and having the right people is a great way to go faster. The right people means that I have a network of people I know ahead of time that are pre-vetted, and I know what they're good at. So I'm kind of the middle person. I'm the hub of all that. And I'm able to bring people in that already know what they're doing. So the learning curve is much shorter, sometimes almost non-existent. So that's kind of what I did, is put together these partnerships with first a couple of companies, and now have partnerships with over a dozen companies and a lot of individuals. And we have business development agreements, and we have NDAs, and we're kind of all ready to go. So whether I go to a small company or a big company like Eli Lilly or Medtronic, I can walk in and bring whatever size team they want, and I'm sort of the talent broker, I guess. So I'll bring in this talent. But I have a small core team that we look at these products first and do an assessment and figure out how to get the right product. In fact, here I'm going to share my screen just to kind of show you what this looks like. And the funny thing about it is a lot of this has came out of necessity. It's funny because I'm out here in the middle of nowhere in the country.
Michael, you want to see?
Yeah.
You want to show the screen?
Yep.
Okay, let me do that.
I don't know if it's letting me do it yet.
No, it will now.
Okay.
Do you see
Oh,
it?
there we go. Okay. I do. Let's go over to, well, that's weird. Okay, we'll try this one. Tell me if you can see anything.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, I have Oklahoma DSL, so it might be a little slower.
Oh, there's something.
There we
You're
go.
on.
Yep, we got you.
All right. I'll just show a couple of these.
There we go.
See what's going on there. All right. Do you see a slide?
We do.
So really, I'm focused on three things. One is I'm focused on the reliability of the products and in having the experts already in place. And then I got involved in talent optimization. So when I engage with clients, we're trying to help work with them to figure out the internal versus the external team. I'll show you just quickly here. I'll skip that. I don't want to give a whole presentation. Okay, so this kind of shows some of the companies. This isn't a full list that I have in this, we call it the Alliance. But these companies, some are more design oriented and some are more analytical oriented. So if I need an expert in industrial design, I have those people. If I need somebody with expertise in human factors, we have those folks. If we want somebody to do testing, like stress engineering, they have all kinds of capabilities to do advanced testing or modeling. Plastics companies. So I'm able to kind of put together an all-star team with some veterans to either assist or do the work for them. Sometimes we're either being an advisor, we're helping their internal team, or they might give us their hardest stuff. So kind of my whole approach is give me your hardest problems you don't want to deal with. And then here I'll show you. And
I
these
think
are some
that's
of the companies.
pretty cool. I see package engineering missing there.
Well, let's have a conversation after this. This would be great.
Yeah, because I work with Dexcom too at one point in time, and Amgen and Medtronics and stuff, trying to help them with their packaging. Dexcom, I had them set up their own department because they had problems on the production line.
Jan, on behalf of the industry, we'd like to ask you not to retire.
Don't retire. Well, one of the things about having this alliance is that people who get fed up with the corporate world, you don't have to retire. I'm going to never retire. I enjoy the work a lot. It's just like a club, but we like to do projects.
Yeah, it is
a little
fun.
bit like what Joe has, except I'm not a super connector like Joe. I'm just a regular connector. Now I have a pretty big network of people, and we set up these teams and we work together, and that's where I was kind of pretty interested in working with Joe and getting to know his community, because we're really trying to create a community as well, a virtual community. And the idea is part of the community thing is to create a culture, and that doesn't happen just by doing the work, but it's some socializing and other things as well. So something I'm interested in doing.
Mike,
but we've been able. Go ahead.
How do you find the various corporations or companies define the hardest challenges? Is it from a science or a long-term perspective, or is it just a lack of fit culturally within the organization?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mean the clients where they have
yes,
problems?
when the clients are, you mentioned that the clients like to give you the hardest challenges or the hardest projects. How do you think they define those things as the hardest? Is it because they're misaligned with basically the teams that they have or the resources that they have in-house, or that they're just big ambitious projects that really are outside of the scope of their quarterly plan or their 3-year plan or something like that.
Yes.
Well, yeah, a couple things there to respond on the hardest. What I say to them usually is, give me your hardest problems. I think the problem that most of my clients have is they don't recognize their problems. So they'll have a problem. So, 10 years ago when I met with the VP of drug delivery for, Amgen, and I said, okay, you want to develop this auto injector. Okay, this is the Dexcom one, but an auto injector is a pretty complicated device. And I asked him a simple question. I said, well, what reliability level do you want? And he didn't know. He didn't know what reliability. Well, of course, the next question, if you want, he says, I want it to be very reliable. Give me a number, or I'll give you a number. It doesn't really matter. And then I said, how are you going to get there? And we're talking about somebody probably with, multiple advanced degrees, and it's a deer in the headlight. They just don't know. Because here's what reliability is. Now, Toyota knows this, but medical device companies typically don't know this. Now, why do they not know it? It's kind of a cultural question. There's not enough mentorship. There's just not enough mentorship. And so most big companies are hiring, young engineers that probably have, a modest amount of experience, and maybe they have a few veterans. Most of the guys with lots of experience end up going into consulting. It's not realistic for a challenging. Now, I'm a little mechanically focused, so I'll get into all the disciplines. I mean, for products, you have all disciplines. So mechanical, electrical, software, human factors, industrial design, everything else. Two things. They don't have enough experience. They don't understand the risk factor. And the risk factor isn't in designing something really cool looking or making an invention, the innovation. The risk factor is manufacturing it in the tens of millions per year and understanding all the factors to do that. And no one person's going to be able to do that. So it really takes a combination of experts and communication and teamwork. It's a knowledge game. Your knowledge is from that's the basis of your products. And if you're developing products, that's your entire business model. Now, I'm going to flip over here to, it's one screen. So I'm just going to show you my Dexcom story because I want to brag here a little bit. Okay, so Dexcom was my great story. Now, the reason it was a great story, and tell me if you guys can see the stock chart. I'll zoom in a little bit.
Now this is all because of you, right?
Here's my resume right here.
Did you invest in 2009 when you got involved?
Unfortunately, I did a little bit, but I didn't really hang on to any of this. So I got involved twice with Dexcom. The first time was in 2008, the end of 2008, and they had a very simple product, or relatively simple, but it tied into blood glucose measurement. And I came in to help them. And I already had some partnerships with two types of companies. One was an analytical company, and one was a product design house. And I did all the math myself. I mean, I'm an ME's ME. I'm kind of really into that. So I did all that work. I brought in more of an industrial design team to kind of design out the rest of the product. And then they licensed it to Edwards Life Sciences. Well, they had it's a very hot space, so there was a lot of companies interested in licensing the technology from them. But this was a small R&D team that had never developed a product before at the time. And I worked with a fellow named Jake Leach, who's now the CTO of Dexcom. Jake at that time just became a manager of like 3 guys. He was a double E. They were at $2 a share. They're over $200 a share now. So that's like a $200 million company. We got the thing licensed. I actually did the design review for Edwards because the team at Dexcom didn't even really know how to do a technical design review. So I kind of conducted it for them with Edwards, and a month later they closed this deal. Their CEO at the time said that if they didn't have that deal, they wouldn't have made it. So it was kind of their survival at that point. Now, my approach to design is the same as it is now. It's just really doing the physics, doing the math, calculating things and then testing it and doing the analysis. Not really complicated. And then bringing in the right people. So a company called Design Concepts, which is now called Delve, they do a wonderful job making products look good. They have good, solid mechanical engineering. So I brought them in at that time as well. So they closed that deal, and then they grew, and then their main product finally started working better and getting traction. And then I came back in 2014 with a team. Now, by this time, I had 3 or 4 companies that I had partnerships with, and they had complementary skill sets. So now I came back, and this guy named Jake Leach was like 4 promotions later. He was now the vice president of R&D, and they had maybe 80 people. But their next generation applicator, which eventually became, this thing, was very complicated, and they were 3 years late, and they didn't have a plan B. So I brought in the folks, and they kind of trusted me because I already had this success with them, and it gave me sort of carte blanche to fix it. Once they realized how much trouble they were in, because we did all this analysis, we did assessment and calculations, and everything was designed wrong. The springs were over their ultimate limit. They basically weren't anywhere near ready for the product. Their CTO at the time, a different fellow, and their executive team met with me, and they asked me if I would just take over the project. So, I said, of course, I'd love to, and I had all the resources to do it. So I brought in kind of a all-star team and had kind of the free reign to run this. We did big design reviews. In about 8 months, we completely redesigned the product and used all these principles for reliability. And the principles for reliability is essentially identify every function and break everything. So you want to break everything on purpose. You bring it to failure. Well, one is you find the failures. 2, you find design margin, because design margin is what drives the reliability of the whole product. And that is how far are you from the cliff, however you want to describe it. What's the weakest link of the device. And this was a pretty complicated device, but we went through and just brought in the right people. The learning curve was very short because we had people that had the experience in those particular areas. We have experts in plastics, we have experts in springs, we have experts in, simulation, all that stuff. And, I'm driving reliability as a design stage, right? So if you test reliability after you design it, you're just measuring what you have, but you don't know why you have it. So reliability at a design level is understanding the variability, its effect on function, and where it fails. And ultimately becomes a probability question. So you put together Monte Carlo simulations of your whole system once you identify it. So on any product, the way I view it is you're going to have variability in the parts, variability dimensions, you're going to have variability in properties, you're going to have variability of process. Everything has variability, and that variability affects function. And if you have too much variability, it eventually fails, just like with a car. And so there's always this tug of war between process and performance. So the people manufacturing it want it to be as easy to manufacture as possible, and you're trying to make it low cost. Well, the people that want it to perform want as little variability as possible. So you're really trying to decide for every feature, every dimension, what's the balance between process and performance. And you can go about this in a very sort of ordered way, which is I drive everything by design margin. And so you have things that are under-designed and over-designed. So under-designed means you don't have enough margin and you're going to fail. Over-designed means you wasted material. So if you know where it's going to fail because you broke everything on purpose, and you can break it virtually or you can break it physically, then you have what I call a Pareto approach to apply your engineering resources.
Mike,
so what you would do is...
How much of the time are you spending breaking things with a virtual twin? Is that becoming more and more the trend?
It should be. It's not as much as I would think it would be, but a virtual twin is exactly the right answer. You're doing virtual prototyping and virtual testing. And if I want to break everything, because that's the first thing, is why do you want to break everything? Well, so you understand failure modes, you understand design margin. What's the fastest way to break something? Virtually. I mean, the tools are so powerful. You don't have to spend, a week on finite element modeling. You can do a finite element model in an hour, and it'll tell you kind of at least orders of magnitude. So you start with lower fidelity, but as you gain knowledge, it's all about knowledge, and all these calculations and simulations, that is your knowledge. And you refine that through testing. It's not an either or thing. One of the problems we have in our culture is a lot of people fall into sort of the idea of what I call binary thinking. like, well, you can't just do simulation. I never said you're just going to do simulation. Just chill out. We can do a math thing here. We'll do an FEA. It's cheap. It's free. It's faster. To build a prototype takes a while. So you're exactly right. There is no reason you wouldn't have some level of virtual twin on any design. It's on your laptop. These tools are inexpensive. They're very powerful. They're way underutilized. One of the things I think that I bring to the equation is when and how do you use them? And I think that's where people get lost. We have a very structured way for testing, right? So if you do an FDA device, you have to write these protocols and do these tests, and you have to validate everything. And all that on the empirical side is all done very carefully. But when you go to the simulation side, it's like, oh, let's do an FEA over here. It's sort of ad hoc. So this has been my direct mission is using math and simulations and, use the tools that are there. They're generally way underutilized. And here's the problem. The management side or the project management, when they put together a schedule and a plan, they think about things that are tangible, like when do I get a prototype? When do I get this thing approved? They don't ask you, they don't put on the Gantt chart, when do I understand how this thing works? And yet, that's the most important part, is knowing how it works. Because once you know how it works, it's not a problem. So what I do is put together kind of a structure there. Anyways, last with the chart here, but the main thing is obviously they've gone up. They started producing these. They're very popular. It's very robust, so they're having good response in terms of it doing what it's supposed to. They're making over 15 million a year of these things right now. So this is why you go into business. It's why you make a product. Now you can have a really cool product and get a bunch of patents, and if you don't make it reliable, and then you have a recall or you have a disruption in your production or you don't have much profit margin, all that's bad. And all those little things is what gets you there. So this is kind of fun. Some of the guys I've worked with said, well, maybe that was just lightning in a bottle here with Dexcom, and we kind of got lucky. I'm hoping to find 5 or 10 more Dexcoms. Now, right now, they're a $20 billion company, and I'm working with them on the third thing, which I'll go back. The third thing that I've gotten into, and I know Joe and I've talked about this a fair amount because it seems like it doesn't fit. And
before you continue, I heard Jan interject. Jan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, I wanted to say it's not lightning in a bottle. I see this all the time, and I love that you break things because that's what I need to know so I can package it and make sure it doesn't have the same thing happening in the field when they ship it. So
what's interesting is if you go through any device, so any medical device that has physical parts, you can identify every single function. It's not a list of 100 functions in here, and some of them are complicated. But everywhere where two pieces meet, there's some purpose. There's an interface. And maybe there's a clearance in some cases, but if there's some kind of function, if there's a gear or there's a spring or there's a action or sliding or whatever, you define all those functions, and then you just do the engineering to support it. Now, most of the products I work with involve electrical items and involve software and other things. But the way I view it is that the mechanical is like the foundation. It kind of has to stand on its own. If I design something robust mechanically, then I can put it in the electrical systems to drive it, the motors, the sensors, and all these other things. And then you can use the software for the next level. But one of my slogans, I will just share a little bit on slogans because I'm kind of a slogans guy, is the way to understand something is to break it down, understand it, and then rebuild it. So you're basically deconstructing it into its pieces. So for a product, you have the whole product, and then you have subsystems in a product, and then you have interfaces between parts, and then you have the components themselves. And what you're doing is understanding that at all those levels and putting it back together. So one of my main slogans is divide problems and integrate solutions. So you just break it down and understand it, and then put it back together again. And if you have people with that knowledge already, it just happens faster. So I'm going to share some of my slogans just kind of for fun. If you have the right people, it makes it really cool because you're tapping into their knowledge. So I have a company, for example, I'll just use one, I'll pick on them, called Plastic Services Network out of Erie, Pennsylvania. And they have about 35 people, wonderful consulting company. They can make any rubber or plastic component. They have all PhDs in material science that could tell you everything about any kind of plastic that you would take 10 years to learn. And so when I have a question about plastics, and I'm going to take that knowledge and then put it into my math or my simulations, because now I'm putting knowledge into it. Because math is a language, right? It's like logic. People sometimes they think math is analysis. It's not. It's really the logic. It's the relationship between the design and the testing and the theory. But it's the intersection of those. But the input to it. So just like logic or math, you have the process, which is the equation, and you either have a good process or bad process. And then you have what you put into that process or that equation. Then you have what you get out of that process or equation. So math is the process. And to run a great company, you want a great process. And then what you want to put good data in, otherwise you put garbage in, garbage out. You want to put good data in, so then whatever your measurement or your analysis or just your knowledge base, it goes into that, and then you continue to test and refine and iterate. But these are some of my favorite slogans. So divide problems, integrate solutions. That's just sort of a fundamental tidbit of philosophy. You want to break something down, understand it, and then put it back together. Sometimes people get that backwards, and they integrate problems and divide solutions, and that's not as effective. So just very simple. I like this one. Hope is not a strategy. That's kind of our running joke, because a lot of people design medical devices and they hope it works, and that's their whole schedule is hope, and they're not really breaking it down. And when it passes, they don't know why it passes, and when it fails, they don't know why it fails. So margin drives reliability. That's kind of the biggest lever. If someone said, look, I have a product, I want to launch it, I want to produce 1 million or 10 million units a year, what's the first thing I need to do? I need to understand design margin. In design margin, how do you understand design margin? You break things. So you break things, you take pictures of it. It all makes sense, even to a non-engineer. It's just not followed. The rule of three. Now, the rule of three is something I use in a lot of different things, but it's really mostly about risk management, because you're not only focused on reliability. Will I successfully commercialize this? Will I have troubles in production, or will I have a really smooth process? That's a knowledge-driven process. Most of us that are making a medical device are doing something extraordinary. There's some invention. There's something that we're doing that no one else has done before. Well, if I'm doing something no one else has done before, that means we've added more risk. So innovation is great, but you've also added more risk, and so have you managed that risk? So when I talked to a vice president, this is pretty much a quote, I think, when I talked to the vice president of Amgen, I said, what is your ambition for this product? What is that ambition, whether it's volume, it's reliability, it's performance, whatever that is, and is your technical rigor to that same level? Because if the technical rigor is not to a level to support that ambition, then you're not being honest with yourself. So my focus, and part of it's out of my own frustration, I designed a lot of IV pumps that had mediocre reliability, and it could have done better, and most of the errors are avoidable. They're preventable. And most of them are preventable by being proactive. So don't wait till it fails. That's the other one. I said, go find trouble before trouble finds you. You should be looking for trouble. You should be trying to break everything, and that's how you understand it. Of course, if you have someone with that expertise, it's going to accelerate your learning curve. And most medical device companies have people fairly light on experience. So two things about consultants: they tend to be older, and two, if they've been in the consulting business, they're probably seeing 4 or 5 times as many projects in the same time period. So you could take a 35-year-old guy that's been in product design in a consultancy, and their experience is just, really much more extensive, even in maybe someone who has 30 years of experience in a big pharmaceutical company in a very sort of detailed job. The business side of this is really important too, and I'm very interested in the business side because I want to see the business be successful, right? And so I'm looking at a Dexcom and I'm saying, well, the reason we're doing this is so you meet your business goals. So how do you make sure that what we're working on here on products actually meets your business goals? And I think sometimes there's a disconnect there, and that's where the management consulting is a big deal. But one of the things I've recommended, and I've used this quote with Dexcom and others, is be aggressive on technology and pragmatic on products. If you're in the medical device industry, you're working with technology all the time, and then you're wrestling with that technology and turning it into a product. If you're too ambitious on the product and you're not really ready for it, then you can have a failure and you're gambling the whole company. So two things. One is be pragmatic on products and don't just go with one product. So I kind of recommend three levels on a product strategy. One is a low risk, one's a medium risk, and then one's a high risk. But don't bet the farm on the high risk, and don't be afraid of taking some risk, because sooner or later you need to take a big step forward. So that's kind of that part of it. Before I go longer, I've just been talking here. How about I answer some questions, or I can go into this a little bit more?
Actually, Mike, would you talk to them about the predictive index?
Thank you. I had kind of forgotten about that. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. Okay, we'll go back to this slide that I have. So there's three things that I'm doing. There are three business elements that they all relate. The one is my direct work, kind of the guidance, and I have a small core team, and that's really sort of more of an advisory role for engineering management. And then I have all these resources, and I may connect them directly or we'll lead them. So sometimes we create a super team and we lead the whole cross-functional team, or other times we just match them. So I'm just a connector in that case. And the third thing is really teams. So we're dealing with teams on several levels. One is we do a lot of work with Scrum, which is very similar to, anyways, the whole Scrum process, if you're familiar with it, is kind of a very dynamic way of dealing with unknowns. So I'm kind of an advocate of that. And, waterfall versus Scrum, I think there's probably some need for both, but the whole team match is key. And besides the resume or the technical background of the engineers, you also have sort of the team styles, and that is, how do people interact? What is their personality? How do they communicate? How do they lead, etc. So I stumbled across a company less than a year ago called Predictive Index, and Predictive Index makes, I guess it's a psychometric type measurement. It's a very good one. It's been around since the 50s, and then they're applying it in a much bigger way to help optimize teams, identify job requirements, to hire people, to coach them and manage them, and everything else. And I've kind of fallen in love with this tool, and it's become a new offering that we're including. And we're using it in a couple ways. One way is our own team that we have. So when we bring together different players, we have these personality profiles on Predictive Index. And any of you can take this, and I can share some of that. In fact, I'll pull it up in a minute, an example. I'll show you mine. But there's 17 different behavioral profiles, and there's a lot of details within those. And they have a really nice tool for team dynamics. So if you have a group working together, 4 or 5 people, you'll see the different types of, behaviors, whether you're more introvert or extrovert or detailed or organized.
Why don't you pull up the one that we did for the premium members who chose to take the survey with us?
Will do. I will do that.
That'll be the composite. And as you look at this, folks, I'd like to know if you'd value having essentially every member, thank you, Jan, every member of the group be part of this.
Okay, I'll find it here in just a minute. Oh, here we go. And I have the Hage family, and I have, here, let me put this over here. Yeah, it's about what would you say, about 5 or 6 minutes to take the survey, Joe?
If even that much. I think you have that information on another screen, and we can't see it. We can only see your Advantage PowerPoint slide. Oh, there goes it.
Okay.
It was pet for an entire hour, so that counts.
Oh, here, I'll pull yours up first while we're...
Okay.
Why do I not have it here? Hang on a second. I seem to have lost it. Well, I'll pull it off of the email. Or if you have it handy, you can share it too, if you want.
I do. If you, here.
I'll unshare. I'll let you share it, and we'll talk about it. I did a team, the team report's really interesting. So you have different behaviors. You have your natural behavior, and then you have sort of in your job role, and sometimes those don't match very well. So if you have a certain personality or behavior and your job assignment's very different from that, it adds more challenge.
What am I hearing? Am I? Oh, I got something about, yeah, I have. Hold on a second. I inadvertently clicked on something that was not relevant. There. You should see it now. Do you see?
I don't see it yet.
I see
Okay,
your
so
index.
yeah, that's what I'm showing. But the boys don't, apparently?
No, we see it.
We see.
You do. Michael,
Captain,
you
my
don't?
captain.
Michael seems to be frozen. That might explain why he cannot see it.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm.
Bandwidth.
Yeah, I have a bandwidth problem. Can you guys hear me?
We hear
Yeah,
you.
yes, but you are frozen, and apparently you can't see the thing that you were going to talk to.
Well, that's okay. I think it'll come up here pretty quick.
Here, alternatively, I have a different way that you can do it. In the chat box, I'm putting my LinkedIn profile, and you'll see that I have listed this right under my About section. So I'll give you the screen back, or, well, no, I'll give you the screen back, and then if you can, nope.
Oh, there,
No,
I see it now. It
You
came up
do.
now. Okay.
On my screen, you see it?
Yeah, I see your profile right now.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
I can explain a little bit about this behavioral assessment profile, and then we can look at a team one.
yes.
But it says on Joe's here, it says self and then self-concept. And they have 4 dominances: independent, the sociable. Let me just pull up another one here. Hang on a second. It was the main thing about the self is that's his natural behavior, and they call it a captain. That's the description of it. The self-concept is in his role. If those two are pretty similar, which his are pretty similar, that means he's probably doing something that fits him well, that he probably enjoys and thrives at it. Sometimes you'll see people where their self profile is very different from
Mike,
their
it'll
natural
help
self and their
perhaps
role is very different. I'm going to pull up. Good.
Let's look at just one characteristic so they understand. So in self, independent is +2 standard deviations, but it's only 1 in self-concept. So what does that mean?
So the predictive index is based on 4 factors. Dominance is A, and then extroversion, so to the right is more extroverted, patience, and formality. So to the right is dominance, extroversion is B, patience is C. So if your C is really low, it means you're really a driver. You want to have things go fast. You're a little bit impatient. So in the case of Joe, he likes to see action. And then the dominance is kind of how strong-minded you are, right? You kind of a strong position. At the other end, you're more collaborative at the other end of that range. And these standard deviations are interesting. So it's not just if you're high or low, but where you are on that scale, and the interaction on team dynamics is pretty interesting. And then synthesis is a composite of the two, and they add a 5th factor called E, and E is kind of objective versus subjective.
A is dominance.
Sorry, second one is extroversion.
D is what?
And D is formality.
And E is?
Objectivity.
Good. That's helpful for me to have.
And I have a little chart I could show later, but this is a really interesting assessment. It's probably the fastest assessment that I've ever seen. A lot of them take much more time, and getting people to take even a 5-minute assessment is difficult. They don't want to be bothered with it. But the amount of information they get out of that is really pretty extraordinary. In mine, for example, I'm pretty similar to Joe. The D is interesting. If you're all the way to the right, you like a lot of structure and a lot of detail and things to be in place. My D is is like, well, no, it's like your self-concept D, Joe. Mine looks like that. I'm kind of from left to right going uphill. I had all my children and my wife take it too. It's really fascinating. My wife's exactly the opposite. She starts from the upper left and goes to the lower right. So the two of us, just like, we're completely in an opposite pattern.
Did I get this right? That self is how I see myself, and self-concept is how I believe people see me at work?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Michelle.
What's interesting is that actually, if you're a manager or, you know, an owner and you have people working for you, it gives you tips on how to coach people. So let's say they don't line up really well. First of all, it gives you some general tips on their behavior, and if there's a mismatch, if you really have somebody in a job role that doesn't fit them very well, that they may succeed, but it'll probably take a lot more effort, and they may not be able to perform as well. And you can coach them, and when you hire people, you can kind of look for those, you know, personalities. So at the extremes, it's really obvious, right? If you're going to be international sales director, you know, you're probably going to have to be fairly comfortable in social environments. So you're not going to hire an ultra introvert, and you're probably not going to want someone that's overly detailed. But if you have somebody and you're going to hire them to be the director of plant safety at a, you know, nuclear power plant, you're going to want somebody that's really focused on those details. Do you want to, Joe? Do you want to pull up the one that shows the team plot?
Yeah, let me see.
Or is there any questions so far on this?
Actually, my question is to the folks, what value do they see in this assessment, if any?
We use them here at Argo. They're
Do
really
you use
good.
PI? No.
We use something. One of our clients is called Foresight. It looks super similar. We've also done the I forget the other one. The one where you're a three slots. You're a C. I forget exactly what that was. Not Briggs Myers.
DISC.
DISC. That's it. The DISC profile. We've used that one.
DISC is very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Joe, can I share my screen again?
Yep.
Real quick to Joe's question, I have used the DISC extensively along with a number of other tools. And in my last normal job, I had an industry, and it was really transformative to my team building. And to I think is it Mike that's doing the presentation right now?
Yes.
But I used it to hire, because I built a team from scratch, and I used both internal people that already knew their discs and external people that I had profiled before I hired them. And then I balanced the whole team out with the skill sets I need for the different roles and for the different challenging people they had on their counterparts on the other side of the organization. And I just got hired by a friend of mine who used to be the CFO at this last normal job and now works for a major company that's owned by Michelin. And she wants me to staff her regulatory and quality team because she just had a mass exit because they had a misfit in their leadership personality. And so I just got hired to staff her team because of the way I staffed my team when she remembered working with me last.
Nice. Hey, before you continue, Mike, we have a new friend on the phone. Say hi, Sue.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So Sue's my guest today, and we've interacted a bit on LinkedIn. Tell us about what you do.
I have a medical device company. Again, my name is Sue. I'm a pharmacist by trade. I saw a problem in the hospital system concerning the filtering process of medications packaged in glass ampoules, and it continued to haunt me throughout my career of 35 years of pharmacy. So one day I decided to come up with a solution. It took me about 15 years. I'm still working on it, but I have a solution, and I'm currently preparing for pre-FDA approval. It's a type of filter needle that will increase compliance, save time, money, and increase safety, decreasing needle stick injuries.
Oh, that's interesting to me. I've had a couple of people talk to me about needle sticks in the years I've led the group. So if I understand what you said, the principal value proposition is now healthcare professionals won't have accidental needle sticks.
Yes, yes. Last year, I think there were 600,000 needle stick injuries, which cost the hospitals close to $800 million to treat. And then the time wasted for preparing the needle exchange process for medications and glass ampoules was about 225 million. So it's $1 billion safety increase.
I'm aware of at least 2 other companies pursuing needles that immediately retract as soon as the shot is. Are you aware of them, and do you have some kind of patent or reason?
I am aware of the retractable needles. This is actually kind of a easier way that's quicker. The current process for filtering medications packaged in glass ampoules is a multi-needle, multi-step process. You need 2 needles, one a filter needle. You have to break the glass ampoule. Then you have to filter out the medications packaged in glass ampoules. And then you have to, while the medication's in the syringe, you have to take that needle off, recap it. And that's where a lot of the needle stick injuries happen. And then you have to take that needle off and throw it away. And then you have to put a new needle on it, and then you're ready to inject. What I came up with is I relocated the filter from the Lurlock end to the tip and took out the needle. So there's no needle. And you break the ampule, you insert the medical device, the filter, you draw it up into your syringe, and you remove the outer filter cover, and you're left with the inner needle ready to inject. I have 2 patents in the United States and a patent pending in Canada. We conducted discovery questionnaires with about 150 healthcare professionals and validated our value proposition. I took an I-Corp class and Agile, and I've been involved with Innova, Fairfax here in the East Coast, the venture capitalists there. I'm working with some TEDCO and some local seed funding groups.
On the phone with you right now are experts in regulatory, including a 21-year FDA veteran, packaging expertise, engineering expertise, manufacturing and engineering and design. So if any of you have a thought, like you just heard her say something and that made you think, uh-oh, did she blah, 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 or I wonder if she blah, 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 we can take a moment. Oh, and Peter does translation for when you are international and needing to translate your work and IFUs and the like in different languages. Did she say anything, folks, that made you think, I wonder if, or questions that you want to just make sure she's dotted and crossed?
Yeah, absolutely. Sue, how far along are you in the development of the product?
Well, we have the original prototypes were built prior to my last patent, which I received on 2017. Actually, I applied for some amendments to the claims, which were just granted a couple of months ago. So we have the prototypes, but they're not, sterile, and they're not ready for FDA. Our next milestone is to have a pre-FDA submission and meet with the FDA here. I have a lot of friends in the FDA, and so we're scheduling an appointment.
Got it.
Is it your full-time gig, or do you?
Right now it's full-time. I left my clinical pharmacy practice almost a year ago because my investors said they wanted to see me work on this. Yeah.
Okay. Michelle, Larry, anything?
Yeah, this is something for the future, of course, but when you described the method that it's used is a change for, I think it's a change for the people who are doing these injections now. And this going to be very important, that your design validation, where you get to the point where you've got your commercial design and you establish what it has to do in order from a user interface, human factors, the whole thing. Because if I were FDA, I would say, how do you know that they're going to be able to do that? How do you know that that's not going to introduce another kind of a problem when they do it? All these are things that obviously are down the road for you, but it should help you almost be driving your design at this point, that you've identified the user interfaces. As our earlier speakers, you broke it a few times to find out what your failure modes are, and those kinds of things now will obviously greatly enhance the potential manufacturability and usability in the future. So, but yeah. I'm really interested. What you described is great. I love it.
Actually, I've been working with a company called Galera down in the Research Triangle area, and we brainstormed right before I wrote my other patent. And
That's
we
Tim Hopper's group, yes?
Pardon?
Tim Hopper? That's Tim Hopper's group?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He actually left. So.
Oh, right, he did.
Yeah. His son was in a severe car
I wrote about Riley.
So I think he's working more in that field right now, but Tim and I are old friends.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, I mean, because I've been working with them since 2012. So we did come up with a working prototype that works great. Our first prototype, there was a problem that it didn't draw out quick enough, but that's been refined. So we're ready. I just need $600,000 for FDA approval.
There you go.
Yeah.
I always think of packaging, of course, so I'm not sure what you think you're going to put it into, and hopefully it's not what BD uses. So
I'm in discussion with BD as well.
They have bad packaging for needles, so
yeah.
Be careful.
I am.
Everyone on the call, I'm putting Sue's LinkedIn URL in the chat box so you can find her after this call, because she's my guest today, not a premium member for you to just chat her up. Oh, yeah, Michelle?
So Sue, do you already know the product code that you suspect you're going to fall into with the FDA?
It's going to be a 510K class 2 device, and I have a friend that said he'll code it for free.
Under which regulation, either the regulation number or the product code, do you?
Yeah, I don't have the product code, but I know what it's going to be. I don't know it offhand, but it's going to be the same code for filtered needles right now.
Okay. So my only piece of additional advice would be to double check the actual product code description, because it will tell you any special controls that you have to consider, including recognized consensus standards, guidance documents for those type of devices. I know there are a lot of them. They may not apply to you, but you're going to have to tell the FDA for the ones that don't apply because of your design. Why not? Just as much as be conscientious of the ones that could apply. And then to reinforce Larry's point, you can't underestimate the value of doing the HFE as you're going through the prototyping, and use that to inform your design, and then call them, I think they're called formative usability studies, that you can show the FDA how they literally informed your design, so that maybe at the end when you do your summative usability, it can be maybe a little bit smaller in size or scope because you've done it along the way.
Sure. Now I do have a 513G prepared, but I was told that right now the 513Gs are antiquated at this point. So
and they have a fee, and you can get a pre-sub right now for free in terms of the FDA fees. But it's still the thing that 513Gs are binding and pre-subs are not.
Yeah, and if 513G isn't right, it could put me back 6 months. So I'm gonna wait for the pre-submission and meet with them.
So you just met a lot of people with a lot of different expertise saying lots of different things. We recorded this. It'll be available for you. And I can put you in touch with any of the folks that are on this call. So,
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Mike, I'll give you the screen again. And you were just about to take us, well, we were discussing the predictive index, and then we started talking about the differences versus, yes, Michelle?
Hey, Mike, I have a funny story because my husband's listening kind of in the background. And so
Sure.
he like
That's
came
not
in.
allowed. He's got to be in, we got to say hello to Count. If he's listening in, he has to say hello. That's the way it works.
Hey, baby, come in here. Do you want to tell the story?
No.
Come on, man.
At least say hi. Just say hi, then I'll tell the story.
Where's everybody at?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Count. This is
Good
my
morning.
husband. So Count is a DI and I'm a CD, and I know this because I made Rod Bartell, who owns Bartell and Bartell, that does a similar type of thing for a living, was my personal coach for a number of years. And before I would marry Count, I made Count get Bartelled, and I had Rod Bartell debrief me on whether it was a good idea to or not. And so it happens to turn out that my husband has a similar personality to Rod, and I have a similar personality to Rod's wife. So I got this thumbs up to marry my husband.
Way to go. Way to go. That's a great story. You know, it's interesting. So I mentioned earlier I had all my kids take it, and I have 7 children, and it's quite the personality study. But one thing I wanted to say about predictive index that I don't want to miss, there are dozens of psychometric tools out there, and there's a lot of them that are very good. DISC is very popular, and there are a lot of them approach it in a different way, and predictive index is also a pretty good tool. It's probably one of the shortest surveys. It's like 5 or 6 minutes, very, very quick. But there's 2 MBAs that took over the company. They bought predictive index about 5 years ago, and they're turning it into a much broader tool. So they're calling that talent optimization. Can you guys see my screen, by the way?
Yep.
Can you guys see anything?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Okay. Yep.
Either this diagram or another one. They bought this and they have like 5 different assessments, and they're really using it as across-the-board people strategy tool and optimization tool. So whether it's hiring, they have a job assessment for the job you're looking for. So before you hire someone, you actually find the type of profile you're looking for that position, whether that's leadership or whether it's detail or what have you. And we show Joe's here with the different factors. They have these 4 factors in this profile, and there's 17 different primary profiles. And I'm getting into this here is this map is kind of their business model. Basically, you're taking your business strategy across the organization and applying your people strategy to meet your business goals. And each of these has a different function. So you're hiring people that fit well for the need. And the Inspire is kind of the management tool. How do you interact with the team and manage people with their different behaviors? And there's also a cultural side, and they actually have these cultural models. So you might be at a company that you're not a good cultural fit. If you're looking for a more stable company, or you thrive in a fast-growing. And then you have a diagnose, which is kind of dealing with some of the problem areas. And they have a strategic tool for more for the executive team to figure out how aligned you are. So all the tools together, they're kind of taking it from hire till retire, I guess, all the people strategy, and it just adds efficiency to it. A lot of it's common sense, and you can apply these tools. But on the other tools, even though they're very good, most of them aren't applied that much. You're kind of using that for team dynamics, but it's not laid out as far. So I just thought I'd share that with you. You can test drive it, take it. I'll share with you. Tell me if you guys can see this this little bullseye chart.
We can. I silenced a couple of microphones because there was a lot of echo. I'm not sure who was the culprit. Yes,
okay, so this is an example of the team analytics or team report. And here we have Jan and Joe and Michelle and Alan on this chart. So out of the behavioral ones, they put together this sort of team dynamics. Now this is an overall, but let's jump into communication. So there's 4 different charts, and it describes how those behaviors fit. And in each of those, you can tell if your team is more distributed or if you're kind of lopsided. And you can actually select your teams using some of this information, or if you're just aware that you have a weak spot, you try to compensate for it. So here's on communication. So you have connecting, respecting, telling, and persuading, and there's a lot of detail. I can make these reports available for MDG Premium with whoever wants to take it. Taking action, this one's kind of interesting. Implementing, commanding, innovating, and coordinating. Well, I should have added myself onto here. Anyway, that's all right. And then here's decision making. So you have the team dynamics of how you work as a team, especially if you're a team, a team structured organization and you're doing a lot of scrum teams and a lot of dynamics. This becomes pretty valuable. So I thought I'd share that with you and see if you have any questions about that.
Why am I that color?
Good question.
I notice on my charts I'm like a V on on the lines, which I thought was odd too. But
well, let me pull up one of you guys. Who wants to be the guinea pig? And I'll pull up one of you. We can use Joe, of course, if not.
Michelle raised her hand.
Michelle? We'll use Michelle as the guinea pig, okay?
See my V? Oh, got someone. Alan's sort of like that too.
Okay, so here we go, and we'll do the full view. Tell me if you can see this.
I can see it.
Okay, so you are a maverick. That's the same as I'm a maverick as well. So you like.
My wife is a maverick.
And your wife is a maverick. So you need a few, it's nice to have a few mavericks around because they really get things going, but you want other people to balance them out. You're very independent and pretty sociable. And then your job, your D is a little further over. You're still at the low end on the D. So it looks like you like things to be kind of wild and out of control. Is that fair?
Is that true? That doesn't sound like. This is Michelle's, right?
Well,
Michelle's, right?
So the thing is that like I think things are wild and out of control, and if anybody's going to make the rules about to bring them into control, it needs to be me.
Ah, gotcha. And that's the high A as well. So you're very independent-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if there's anything that's different. So you're pretty sociable here on your extroversion, but in your job function, you're more situational. So do you kind of feel like you're adjusting to the work environment?
Very, very high introverted, but I am very well trained because I am so aware of how introverted I am that I have taught myself to be social and appear as an extrovert because I need to for the business.
This is opposite of what it's saying. If I understand it, self is how you see yourself, and and self-concept is how you believe we, your peers, see you. Right, Mike?
Yes, exactly. So this should be kind of your natural self, and then this is how you feel in your job role, how you must perform. So your D, you're showing you would like to see you feel the need to follow a little bit more of a structure than your natural self, but you're not all the way over to the right.
I was isolating A because she said she's an introvert, which I've known you for 2 years, and I wouldn't have guessed that.
Let's do. I'm going to pull up the full behavioral report, and I want to show you just a couple of the other tools here. So this is in our behavioral report. Did I send that to you, Michelle? I can't remember if I did or not.
I got the auto email with the reports after I took it.
Okay, because there's a description here too. Strongly venturesome and taking risks and focusing on the future, almost exclusively concerned with where they're going rather than how they'll get there or where they've been. Very adaptable, solves problems as they occur rather than through advanced planning. Does some of that resonate? Very independent, confident, decisive, self-starter, intense, and driving.
That's me.
That's you. Okay.
So
Now
I
here's
say,
what's
describe myself like this. I come from a long line of unemployable people, meaning that at least the third, if not the fourth, in a generation of entrepreneurs that have to create our own thing because we just don't fit in with normal societal roles and boundaries and rules and all that stuff. So we went and made our own.
That's an
so here's what's
excellent spin.
interesting is,
I've got to
you know,
adopt
this
that.
is here's a behavioral report, but here's some tools for the Inspire or the management. So let's see, you have a personal development chart, a manager development chart. So one is if you're the manager and the other is if somebody's managing you. So let's just take one of these and see what happens.
Mike, I'm hoping at some point you'll direct the conversation to how, if everyone in premium were to take this and we were to see all of our team members on the plot, how would we effectively use that? Might someone who's very collaborative say, I need someone to complement this, and then go on the other side of the chart and say that would be a good person for me to talk with? Because I know I see value in posting my results on my LinkedIn profile so people know what they're going to encounter when they work with me. Do you think it's just that times 80 or 100 if everyone were to do it, or is there more value than that?
Well, predictive index is focused on sort of the business side of things. They're really looking at these behaviors in terms of doing work together. It doesn't mean it won't help you in a non-work situation. So if you're in just a social setting, it's still pretty interesting because you have a sense of how to communicate with somebody. But I think where the real value lies is when you have a team that's actually working together. So maybe that comes out of MDG Premium, that people find opportunities to work together, and you say, okay, now let's put those people together and say, let's say I worked with Sue and maybe someone else worked with Sue, and the three of us were going to go help her move her product forward. Then it would be pretty helpful.
Okay, well, I'm all for it. I understand it in concept. It's hard for me to kind of crystallize if it were there was something linear about it. When you take this, then we know this, and this is how we form something. But I think it's just going to be a bit more abstract, where we can all kind of appreciate where we fall, understand one another's work styles better, and choose to work with people accordingly.
We built one of my whole web pages around the regulatory stages of grief and how part of my primary job is to meet people emotionally where they're at with coming to terms with the regulations.
Yes.
This kind of stuff helps me if I know right away where a client falls on the spectrum rather than I'm using my instinct to figure it out. I can figure out what are their triggers, why are they having this reaction to what the requirements are, and how can I move them more quickly through that process to accepting what they need to do to bring their product to market.
Would you find, let's just remove cost and obstacles at the moment, would you find value in having your clients take this so you understood that to help them better given the context of your grief counseling?
Yes.
So Mike, I don't know what kind of arrangement you can figure out or work with where, you know, maybe for a nominal amount, Michelle could use it and have her clients take it or something, or maybe offer that to the group. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming.
Well,
yeah, I think in terms of,
I've got to figure out how to present that to my clients. Like, why do I want them to take this personality test to do regulatory work? Because they don't understand that whole spectrum of emotion and communication that's going to be involved in the process. That's just something
the marketing challenge.
I mean, one of the things that I'm focused on is that to be successful in business and to develop products is a knowledge process. We're all in the knowledge business, and so how do we manage knowledge? And you manage knowledge in teams, so it's a team activity. I say that knowledge is a team sport, and so you're dealing with communication styles, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with communication, but you're working through all that to learn something, and then you're going to apply that knowledge in terms of your business, your product, your service, or what have you. And so you're dealing with both of those simultaneously. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I'm focused on the engineering world and trying to, a lot of times engineers are in denial of emotions, I guess. At least that's the stereotype. But they're there. They're just maybe buried more, or something like that. But you really do need to deal with both. And even just in communication styles, in making decisions, you're going to have different behaviors. So you have some people more reserved than others. And, you've all participated in ineffective meetings and probably effective meetings, but to be able to work together as a team, you have communication issues, you have leadership issues, you have decision-making issues, and any tool to help you kind of organize that. But yeah, I would say right now for the MDG Premium, if anyone requests to take the assessment, I can send them a link, and I don't think I'll have any restrictions yet. And if you have clients you want to do that too, then we can just set up a call and talk to them, and I could give them a complimentary behavior.
Peter wrote me a note, so go ahead and send one to Peter Argondizo. He's interested.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a big, what I'm trying to figure out, the Dexcom experience I had was very good, except I had one major problem, and that was my biggest engagement in my career. They're ultimately successful, but, the engineering talent I bring in is to fix the product, help companies fix the product. But management consulting is about fixing the organization. And companies usually need both. They usually need some help on the organization and they need help on the products. An organization could be, how they operate, how their culture, everything. So to run a really great company takes a lot of effort, and some companies do it very well. Ideally, both of those things are working in harmony. So I would almost be happier to help the R&D guys fix their product while someone's helping them build a healthy organization, because otherwise it's a battle. And ultimately they win by, making a great product, and great companies are more able to make great products.
I've done a lot of quality remediation work on companies that have had warning letters, 483s, import alerts, almost lost their CE marks. And there is no way that you get into that level of trouble with the FDA or a notified body without having a major company cultural breakdown. Like once you get to the warning letter stage, you've had all these warning shots along the way. And to me, like right now in my own business, I won't take remediation work ever unless you commit to doing some level of this personality diagnostic to figure out where did your culture break down that it created this whole series of events that led to such a catastrophic breakdown in your quality system, because that's not just a system problem. That's the way.
That's what I'm excited about with this predictive index. And I've added more partners that are not technical. So I have a partner that does management consulting work and organizational structure and culture. And the culture part is a big deal. And you need alignment between all these things. So, alignment is a huge issue. So strategy at the leadership level means, okay, whoever's leading your company, they're all on the same page. They're all pulling the same direction. That sounds simple, but if you're dysfunctional, like you said, these organizations that are dysfunctional, and I've seen them, it's a mess. It is a mess. And then if you do something well, like this one was a big win. So they're making $15 million a year. The guy that was the CEO, who's Jake Leach's father-in-law, bought an island in the Bahamas. That's how much they made, and they got, their yachts and everything. But and they could use a little optimization. They can go from a $20 billion company to a $60 billion company if they do the culture stuff right, if they organize it right and really operate, and be willing to get outside help, because if you don't go after reliability proactively, it's going to bite you. Probably more likely that they'll stumble. Any other questions? I think that I've kind of covered this a lot. I think I can share with anyone who just reaches out to me, and I'll send them an invite. And if you have a client that you think can benefit from this, I'd be happy to share more about the predictive index. And I have there's a ton of information about it, but I'll just say that there's no other product like it in terms of how comprehensive it is. It's across the board. If I was a CEO, I'd want to use this just everywhere. It would be a given. In fact, a lot of CEOs that have discovered it, just like we just use this all the time. There's also a cognitive assessment in high performance jobs in high tech world. It matters. what your cognitive, it's not IQ directly, it's more kind of your learning curve. But in very high pressure, high tech jobs, it's a very important assessment. So they have a job assessment, they have a cognitive assessment, and you have the behavioral assessment, which we talked about. You have a strategic assessment, and then there's some cultural tools as well. And they've integrated it all across the board. And there's a diagram I could share later, where otherwise you'd have to get those tools in different areas for hire, for inspire, for strategy. Those are usually different products.
I've taken similar tests at when I was working in the hospital, and they compare us to birds. So there were like eagles and doves, and I think I was a dove, the peacemaker, but the eagles are the ones that you know are the dominant and headstrong, and so I thought there is some kind of parallel.
I'm gonna see if yeah, there's a bunch of them out there. There's one that's on they do dog breeds. They have all sorts of different ones, and they're all interesting, you know. I'm gonna see if I find the profiles. The 17 profiles are pretty interesting, and they're in 4 different categories. Hang on, I'll see if I can find this. Oh, here we go. And there's a little video on each one too to see if it fits. So yeah, my idea for the technical work. Oh, so you can see. Tell me if you can see this. So they have analytical profiles like analyzer, controller, venturer, specialist, strategist, and then you have social profiles like altruist, captain, collaborator, maverick, promoter, persuader. And then there's stabilizing profiles, and it's helpful to have stabilizing profiles on teams as well. Adapter, craftsman, guardian, operator. These are all interesting. Scholar. It was amazing to see with the family and with the kids how many different personalities we have. It answers a lot of questions.
When I look at the group that did take the test with Joe's premium stuff here, it looks like we're sort of lopsided.
You might be a little lopsided because you have a lot of independent-minded people, because most of Joe's group is consultants. Maybe.
It'll be interesting to see. I wonder, you know, in that light, with Sue going to market with a product, where she'd fall on all of this.
It would be great to add, you know, 3 or 4 more people to this and see what that dynamic looks like. That's the overall. I think decision-making, communication is really interesting. Let's taking decision-making.
I bet if we get Joseph Anderson to take this, he'll be in the process and precision category.
Okay.
It'll be interesting.
Taking action is a good one. So, on taking action, there's not a lot in the implementation quadrant, or even coordinating. So you have a bunch of innovators that are, and they're very commanding. So you'd like to see a little bit better mix here, a little more distributed, ideally for taking action, especially. So it's kind of a nice dual.
We'll make that a New Year's goal to have more folks take it, and I'll send it out to folks. I've been meaning to write everyone as a group anyhow. So you know, we're a certified partner. I have people that really know this to a deep level, and you know, I just see all this as a great opportunity to promote Happy
the
New
product.
Year. Michelle just left. We typically have been running about an hour and a half, so I think we're just about there. But Sue, thanks for jumping on. Hope you enjoyed. And I'm going to be here next week, and I'm going to talk a bit about kind of kicking off the year, marketing strategy, things to be thinking about as we enter our new decade. How do you like that? New decade.
Yes, that's great.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. And informative.
You can hit me on LinkedIn and I'll give you the way to meet up with some of these folks afterward if you like.
Yeah, Sue, nice to meet you. Let me know if you need any resources that can introduce you to some people that can help.
Okay, thank you. I'm working with a lot of people right now.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye. Bye.